In this video, I will be taking the Druid character we created through the Circle of the Moon class specialization. As indicated before, this class is typically used by players who want to function as protectors of the lands, and of nature in general. They will generally shun urban areas, however, they will reluctantly enter those regions if their quest requires it of them. Otherwise, they are generally self-sufficient in the sense that they can live off the land and not really have to worry about where they're going to have their next meal. They will gather with other druids, primarily to exchange news and information on dangers in the region, but otherwise they will normally go weeks to months without seeing another humanoid. But because of that isolation, they gain affinity with the shape change feature, and as a result can use a wider scope of shapes that other druids simply can't use. This class is perfect for anyone who loves shapeshifting and is able or willing to make use of this feature to help the party as often as possible. However, this character would be played as a reluctant party member due to the sudden influx of characters the player now has to interact with. This does not mean that the character has to always be that way. The reluctance can be an initial reaction, and as the character becomes more familiar with the other party members, they can become more open to interact with those characters on a more frequent basis. On one hand, it's kind of like a real world scenario where the first time you meet somebody, you're always going to be a little bit on guard until you become more familiar with that person, and then you're going to slowly open up over time. That's sort of how this character can be played. Additionally, as previously stated, druids gain their class specialization at level 2 as opposed to at later levels or earlier levels, which right now, to be honest, is level 1. So with that, let's begin the process of putting this character through the Circle of the Moon class specialization. So when I apply level 2 to this particular character, we are going to be prompted to choose our class specialization. In this case, I'm going to choose Circle of the Moon. So let's go ahead and do that now. As part of that level gain, we have acquired a couple of new features. Specifically, we are going to acquire our wild shapeshifting capability, as well as a couple of features that are going to come from our specialization, specifically combat, wild shape, and circle forms. So the first thing I'm going to do is go over wild shape, as that's going to tie directly into the other two features that we've acquired. So wild shape gives you the capability to shapeshift into other beasts, specifically things like wolves, bears. At later levels, you learn how to swim or change into creatures that can swim, such as fish, turtles, alligators. At even later levels, you usually gain the ability to change into creatures that can fly, such as eagles, falcons, or things like that. However, with the Circle of the Moon characters, some of those restrictions are removed, and it's not the ability to swim and it's not the ability to fly just yet. However, with the normal wild shape table, you would usually require significant leveling before you can actually gain the ability to change into a higher level combat rating creature. That's not the case with the Circle of the Moon creature or character and class specialization, but I'll get to that in a moment. Everything else about the shapeshift capability remains the same. So the number of limitations, in the sense that you won't be able to change into a flying or swimming creature until you hit level 4, and you won't be able to change into a flying creature until you hit level 8. So even at level 4, you can't change into a flying creature. Other limitations include how long you can remain in that shape. So at level 1, you can remain in that shape for approximately 1 hour, rounded down. So if you are level 1, you can stay in your shape for 1 hour. If you are level 2, you can stay in that shape for 1 hour. You'll notice that those two don't change. At level 3, you are still restricted to a 1 hour duration. When you hit level 4, that's when you now have the ability to switch into a shape and remain in that shape for 2 hours. So essentially, after you hit level 4, every second level gives you the ability to stay in that shape for an extra hour, up to the point where you hit level 20, where you can remain in that shape for 10 hours. But you get a number of uses in the sense that you can actually shapeshift twice throughout the course of the day or between each rest. So for example, let's say you're out in the middle of a dungeon, you change into a rat to be able to scurry through a particular crevice or hole to get to a lever that's on the other side of that wall, and you scurry back through, but then you shapeshift back into your normal shape. You only have one ability left, or one use, before you can actually rest to regain those abilities. So let's say you've used your second use of that because you had to climb up a wall or get at something that was higher up and you needed something that could stick to the wall a little bit better. You've now burned through your uses. At that point, the party takes a short rest. You regain your ability to shapeshift again. Same thing happens if you take a long rest. So it doesn't matter whether you take a short rest or a long rest, you will regain your ability to shapeshift. And normally, that would apply to all druids. However, Circle of the Moon druids get a little bit more leeway around how often they can shapeshift, and we'll get to that a little bit later on when we get to those particular features. And that pretty much covers the limitations that would usually apply to Wild Shape. So let's take a look at some of the other features. With Circle Forms, at level 2, you now gain the ability to transform into higher level challenge rating creatures. So if you recall, with Wild Shape, you needed the ability to level up before you could actually change into a higher challenge rating creature. That isn't the case with Circle of the Moon Druids. You can actually jump right to a CR rating 1 creature right off the start. Or once you hit level 2, I should say. And at level 6, you can actually start changing into creatures with a combat rating of your level divided by 3. So at level 9, you can now change into level 3 challenge rating creatures. That is powerful. That means you as a character are going to be leveling your wild shape functionality alongside your character, giving you access to greater creatures, greater beasts, things like that. But you are still limited to the beast type. And what I mean by that is if I temporarily switch this to play status and open up the NPCs tab here, all of the creatures that you can change into must have this beast designation. It doesn't matter whether it's a large beast, tiny beast, medium beast, whatever. As long as they have the beast designation, see for example here, the imp you would not be able to change into. That's not a beast. But a mastiff is a beast, which is just really a large dog, or a medium-sized dog in this case, in comparison to a human. An owl is classified as beast, so you still have a fairly large selection. Even a poisonous snake is a beast. So it gives you quite a wide range of selection as to what you can actually change your shape into. And Circle of the Moon druids get a larger selection than normal druids have the capability to make use of. So I am just going to set this aside because we will need that at level 6 so that I can start looking for something that will give you an example as to what you can change into. The last feature to take a look at is Combat Wild Shape. So normally, a druid would require a full action to begin and finish the shape change capability. But with Circle of the Moon druids, and specifically with this particular feature, Combat Wild Shape, you can now do this as a bonus action as opposed to just a full-blown action. So your ability to shapeshift back into your normal form, cast a spell, has you now have that capability to do that during a turn, whereas a normal druid or Circle of the Land druid would not be able to do that. They would have to shapeshift on their turn and wait to the next round before they could actually do anything. If they're going to use a reaction, they're going to be still in beast form or in a transitional state, but they're still going to execute a beast attack. They wouldn't have their hands and arms available to be able to make a melee attack, for example. To be honest, as a DM, I generally will not allow a druid who is in the process of shape changing during a combat turn to do anything other than that shape change. It's not 100% clear whether that is a restriction of the 5th edition rules, but to me it makes sense in my mind in the way that you have to take some time to go from the shape you were in to get to the shape that you're at. In my mind, that's a full turn. It means you as a player or you as a character are stuck doing that. You're focusing strictly on that and essentially ignoring all other activity that's going on around you. When you have finished that shape change, that's typically when you would be able to react again or to be able to take actions. With Circle of the Moon Druids, that restriction is now more or less removed. You can shape change as a bonus action before you execute an action as your normal self, which could include casting a spell. And then the next turn, you can shape change again back into another creature and make an attack with that particular creature all in that same round. That is a powerful capability. Now, there are a couple of convenience things that you can do for yourself as a player, specifically in relation to these three features and linking them against your particular actions tab or making use of favorite creatures, if you will, when it comes to choosing which creatures you want to swap into and change your shape into, and being able to get at the information for those creatures quickly. Generally, all right, I moved this to the elf group last time because that particular cantrip is something that we gained as part of the elf trait as opposed to through our class. Another thing that I would like to mention about Wild Shape is that you are limited on the number of uses that you're going to have. So I'm going to drop this into place here. Oops, I don't want group, this is Druid. Druid. There we go. And here we go. Now, we are actually limited to 2 uses per rest, meaning that we can go through, make use of one of them, and then go rest, and we'll regain that use. So by setting this up so that we have 2 uses, we can now tick that off, and if we burn through all of our options when it comes to how many we can make use of throughout the course of the day or before the next rest, then we don't have the ability to do it again. Once the Dungeon Master goes through and executes a short or a long rest, you'll see that they return. And that is everything that you need to know for Wild Shape when it comes to actually going through and setting it up. However, because Circle of the Moon Druids gain additional features that change how Wild Shape functions, you're going to want to link these two into your Actions tab just to simplify things for you. So I'm going to drop these into place. All right, and this is a circle. And drop this one into place. Now, the reason why I drop circle forms into place is because you may be playing with a new Dungeon Master, and they may not necessarily be fully familiar with the Druid, specifically the Circle of the Moon capabilities. So clicking on this to indicate that you're actually going to make use of that ability to change into a beast shape that is already a challenge rating of 1, and you are a level 2 character, is going to throw that particular Dungeon Master off. So it's always a good idea to be able to just click and drop or drag and drop that into place. The Combat Wild Shape feature, as you can see, gives you the ability to heal 1d8 points per level of spell slots expended. So when you go through a shape change, you have the ability to expend a spell slot and execute a heal so that you can potentially heal yourself as you're coming back out into your normal form, or vice versa. It's a fairly useful feature. And as a result, they are actually kind enough to be able to provide the ability to execute that right here. Now, I mean, if you're expending 2 spell slots, you're going to want to click that twice. And the good news is that if you are in the combat tracker, so I better set that up just 1 second here. Combat tracker, remove that one, open this, drop that. So if you're in the combat tracker, you can target yourself and then execute this, and it will automatically heal you. So if you're going to expend 2 spell slots, you just go bing, bing, after rolling both of those dice. And as you can see here, I would have regained 10 hit points total. Oops. And that's essentially how that particular feature is used. And this is why you want to include it on your Actions tab. As for the shapes that you could switch into, you're going to want to look at accessing the NPCs button here. So you do that by opening up the library. And by default, Fantasy Grounds will start you up in the character creation screen. And generally because it makes the assumption that you're going to be creating a character. However, when you're done that, you don't necessarily want to see all of these buttons, and you do want to be able to get access to other buttons that you're going to want to make use of. You click on the play button here. And as you can see, it will reduce and change the number of buttons that are here and give you different ones, such as the NPC one, which wasn't there prior to us actually clicking that. Within the NPCs section are pretty much most of the beasts that you can switch into. The higher challenge rating ones, those are going to require potentially access to the Dungeon Master's Guide, or for the DM to actually link that into the chat screen so that you can pop open the information on it. But generally, you're not going to get access to those higher tier ones until later on. Normally, anything that is here is something that you can switch into. But as I said earlier, it has to be of the beast type. So to make things convenient for you, all you really need to do is, let's say you want to be able to have the option to switch into a black bear at some point. So you just drag that icon down to your little quick bar here. And now, all I have to do is click that to open and close the creature. So if you have a question about the information on it, you just click that and, okay, I've got the information I need, and you're good to go. Same with the Mastiff. So let's say I wanted to be able to switch into that. And where's the direwolf? I always like the direwolf. So now I have access to beasts that I would potentially regularly switch into at a point in time throughout a campaign. The last piece I want to go over is essentially the last limitation that you, as a Circle of the Moon Druid, still have to worry about. When you switch into that particular creature, and let's open up the direwolf, for example, there's a couple of things that still apply. The first off is that the strength, dexterity, and constitution of that particular creature are now what you would apply to your particular character. The intelligence, wisdom, and charisma are still yours to use. So in this case, you would have a strength of 17, a dexterity of 15, a constitution of 15, but an intelligence of 16, wisdom of 18, and a charisma of 16. So whenever you're executing things like saving throws, ability checks, etc., for strength, dexterity, and constitution, you would roll off this table. But for intelligence, wisdom, and charisma checks, you would roll off of your character sheet like you normally would do. Skills, however, remain as you have them. Not entirely certain as to why that happens, but in general, your proficient skills remain as they are. Finally, the hit points that you as a player require when you shape change does become that of the creature you're shape changing into. So for example, this dire beast, which is a challenge rating of 1, as a Circle of the Moon class specialization character, you have the ability to change into this, which means you're going to have 5d10 hit points of capability there, plus 10 for your total hit points. You could potentially double the number of hit points that you currently have here and exceed that. For a level 1 character, that is very, very powerful. But there's one thing that I want to point out. If in beast form you take sufficient damage that, let's say, you're now going to be knocked unconscious. If you have 1 hit point left and you were hit for 1 hit point, then you simply become knocked unconscious and you revert to your normal form, and you're just laying there in your normal form on the ground or wherever it was that you got knocked out. But let's say I got hit for 23 hit points of damage and I only had 1 hit point left as a direwolf. Well, I'm going to take that 1 hit point off from the direwolf. My body is now going to revert back to my normal form, and the remaining 22 hit points of damage that I have suffered is going to be applied against my current hit point count as the normal player, which in this case is 19. That means I'm going to get knocked unconscious. So you'll want to make sure that you're tracking the hit points that you have as a beast in addition to the hit points that you have as a player. You theoretically could sum the two together to give you your total hit points as that particular beast. But if you just mark on a piece of paper and a notepad inside of the Fantasy Grounds interface, which you can do here, just open up and right-click, create a new note, then and just track your hit points there, then you don't really need to worry about it too much. As your hit points become under what you're supposed to have, you revert to your normal form. Your hit points come into play, and you and the DM could work together too at the same time. So while you're in beast form, your temporary hit or your hit points could be set to be that of the direwolf as you rolled them, and then when you revert back, you gain back to your normal hit points. I, as a dungeon master, would add these to your temporary hit points. That way I don't have to worry about it. It's just simpler. And any dungeon master that goes through and runs their campaign might also do that as well. Now, because I've gone up a level, there's a couple of things that I want to look at in relation to the actual Druid table. So I'm going to close all of these out because I'm going to keep that one open because we've covered everything that we can here. One, I need to make sure that I've gone through and checked and compared against my cantrip. So at level 4, we're going to gain a third cantrip. So I want to keep that in mind for when I gain level 4. Proficiency bonuses is something that we're also going to gain, but we don't really have to do anything with that. So I'm not going to worry about covering those in this particular video. They will increase, and then all of our stats that are tagged as proficient, as well as our skills that are tagged as proficient, will automatically gain their bonus increases. And finally, we will be gaining spells. Now, spellcasting as a druid is different than spellcasting as a wizard. And down near the bottom, you will see a spellcasting option here, or sheet rather. So I'm going to push this back up to here. It is going to give you access to your druid's table list, or your druid table list for spells. That includes cantrips and all of the spells that you as a druid can cast. Any spell that you acquire will have to come from this particular table. You can't take one from like a wizard's table or a clerical table, for example. If it isn't in this list, you as a Circle of the Moon druid don't get it. However, as a druid, because it works very similar to the way that a cleric is able to acquire their spells, you can decide at the time of rest, and specifically a long rest, or at the time of leveling up, what spells you want to prepare. So let's say I acquired level 3. Actually, I've already acquired level 2, so I could actually choose a spell right now. These are the spells that I currently have. At this particular point in time, I could theoretically change Thunderwave and replace it with another spell and still select my additional spell that I gained at this particular level. Now, this particular character doesn't really have much in the way of combat-oriented spells, so I'm going to probably keep Thunderwave there. But because druids pray every rest period, and this is a long rest period, not a short rest period, to prepare their spells, you could also do that when you're resting. So at the time of your prayer, you could choose to take Entangle off and throw Fairy Fire in there, for instance. So as a druid, you don't have that limitation that other players have when actually choosing their spells at the time of study or rest. Now, the total number of spells that you can actually go through and prepare is your class level, so in this case we're level 2, plus your wisdom modifier. So in this case it is a +4. So that means I have the ability to prepare 6 spells. Right now I only have 5 in this list. So I'm going to go through and add another spell. The limitation to that is that it has to be of a spell slot level you can actually cast. So I don't get a second level spell slot until I hit 3rd level with this particular character. That means that when I choose this particular spell, it has to be a 1st level spell. So I'm going to choose Longstrider in this particular case. Might be a bit redundant for this particular character simply because of the fact that I could theoretically change into a form that could jump further. But maybe I've already burned through my limitation, so it's kind of half useful to go through and make sure that I have it. So I'm going to go through and switch this to preparation mode and then click on the little option here to show you that it's prepared. And then as you can see, you can now click on it, make use of it. And that's everything that we have to do for level 2. At level 3, we're not gaining any new features, nor are we gaining any cantrips or proficiency bonuses that we have to worry about. The only thing we're gaining is our second level spell slot and our ability to actually prepare a second level spell. So I'm going to minimize the cantrips and level 1 spells, and all I did was left click on the black bar here in order to minimize and maximize it. And I'm going to choose something that is more oriented to a guardian style creature, because as I've said in the past, Circle of the Moon based druids are protectors, they're guardians. So they're going to be a little bit more combat oriented. Yeah, I'm going to choose that one. So I know I selected that in the previous one. And I'm just going to drag and drop that into place. And as you can see, it dropped into the right location. The last thing I need to do is make sure that I prepare that spell. So I'm just going to go through, minimize that, and prepare the spell. And that is everything we have to do for level 3. At level 4, we're going to acquire our Wild Shape Improvement ability, which unfortunately isn't really going to apply to a Circle of the Moon character, and I'll explain why in a second. We will also gain our ability score improvement capability in addition to a new spell slot, or as well as the ability to study a new spell. So, what did I mean by Wild Shape Improvement? Well, a normal druid or a druid of the Circle of the Land, when they level up, they would now gain access to 1/2 challenge rating creatures or combat rating creatures because they've now hit level 4. That doesn't happen in the case of a Circle of the Moon druid because you've already gained the ability to use CR creatures as high as level 1 or as high as 1. I shouldn't use the word level there because it's actually a misleading term in relation to a challenge rating creature. So this is something that you as a Circle of the Moon druid will really not gain any benefit from. But you will still gain the other capabilities that you're getting here. So in relation to the ability score improvement, I will cover that in a moment. Right now what I'm going to do is make sure that I have selected my spell. So I still have the ability to, first off, drop that into here. And I didn't actually apply level 3. Oops. Sorry. My apologies. Okay, so I have now gained an additional spell slot here. So let's see. I'm going to go with heat metal. Got to heat up those axes out there if someone's cutting down a tree and I'm trying to protect that forest. And that covers everything that we have to do for the spells, except I have to go through and prepare that. So there we go. Now, if you're not sure as to whether you have acquired all the spells, as I've stated before, all you have to do is add your level and your ability modifier here for wisdom together to get 8 total at this particular point in time. And then count the number of spells that you have prepared. If it equals 8, you're good. And in this case, I'm already certain that it equals 8. So we're good. We also gain the ability for another cantrip here. So I'm going to very quickly expand out our cantrips. And, okay, so we have 2 cantrips here. We're allowed 3. So let's see, we got Guidance and Shillelagh. I'm going to go with Poison Spray for this one. That seems to make sense for this particular character. And finally, in relation to your ability score improvement, in fact, let's look at level 4. There are a couple of options that you have available to you as a player. 2 of them you are absolutely guaranteed to be able to do. The third one is something that is going to be completely dependent on the Dungeon Master. So the two things that you can do as a player by default as the rules of 5th edition state is as follows. You can take one ability, and this means your ability score, such as your strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, and modify one of those by 2 points. So I could take, for example, my wisdom and add 2 points to that to give that a 20. The second option that you can choose is to take 2 of those ability scores and increase each of them by 1 point. So I could take, for instance, my Constitution and my Wisdom and add 1 point to each to give me a 17 for my Constitution and a 19 for my Wisdom. The third option is going to be entirely dependent on whether the Dungeon Master is allowing feats in the campaign or not. So I'm going to temporarily switch this back to Create PC. Your feats are going to be under this option here, so this particular button here. All of these are feats that you can choose as a player at the time that you are gaining an ability score improvement, but only if the Dungeon Master is permitting that particular process inside of their campaign. There are some Dungeon Masters that don't allow players to use feats. It's an optional rule. There are, however, restrictions in relation to some of these. For instance, a spell sniper, you have to have the ability to cast spells. That could simply be a cantrip, gives you the ability to cast a spell, and then you could make use of that particular spell as part of that, or sorry, make use of that particular feat as part of that particular spell's casting. For Observant, there's really no limitation. You're getting the ability to increase either your intelligence or your wisdom score by 1 point to a maximum of 20. Okay, that's fine. But you're also gaining these other benefits. So this is one of the reasons why feats can be considered a little bit overpowered. So Lucky gives you the ability as a player to essentially re-roll an attack that was made against you if it hit you. But you have to be careful when you do that. And I'm not going to cover Lucky in this particular thing, but that's generally one of the ones that Dungeon Masters consider to be overpowered, is because of that. You can force that Dungeon Master to re-roll that attack roll. Or you can re-roll your own attack roll if you felt that you missed. Those kinds of things. In this particular case, I'm literally just going to increase my wisdom by 2 points and bring that up to 20, because I want to highlight what now happens. My wisdom modifier has now gone up to a +5. Well, what that means is that I can now choose another spell here and prepare that spell, because I now have the ability to prepare 9 spells as opposed to 8 spells. I only have 8 spells prepared, so 2, 4, 6, and 2 more here, that's 8. So I'm going to add Pass Without a Trace on this particular case. And that's it. That completes everything that we have to do for level 4. So at level 5, we are gaining another spell. Specifically, we're gaining the ability to cast 3rd level spells. So I'm going to drop that into place. Try not to forget this time. Minimize that, and then I'm going to go back to the Actions tab here, and Wind Wall. That could be useful. I'm going to drop that into place. So I now have 1 3rd level spell, and I'm going to prepare that spell. And that is literally everything we have to do for level 5. In relation to level 6, we're going to gain our next Druid Circle feature, which in this case is going to be Primal Strike. Additionally, because we do have circle forms, we are now going to be able to start making use of challenge rating 2 creatures. So I'll go through and cover that in a moment. Let's first drop our level into place. And we are increasing the number of spells that we can cast, but because our level has gone up, we are also increasing the number of spells that we can prepare. So I'm going to deal with that first. And I'm going to go with Daylight. And set this to Prepared. Now, you may have noticed that something just happened there. With this window up in front, because this particular dragon symbol, if you will, this wrapper that goes around this particular border of the window here, it's at the same level that this preparation button is. So you can't click on it. In fact, I'm left clicking like a madman right now, and it's not doing anything. So you may have seen that I flipped up to here to more or less activate this window to sit it on top of this window, and now I can actually click that button. As much as I like Fantasy Grounds, I honestly think this is a pain in the ass. excusing my terminology. This really is something that is annoying in most cases. As nice as it is, and don't get me wrong, I like it, but it irritates the crap out of me so frequently because I keep forgetting that it's there. That's one of the reasons why I always choose a different theme. Now, I'm using the default theme here because there are still some issues with some of the other themes in relation to the updates that have happened. Hopefully, they've been sorted through. I actually haven't looked for a while, but I didn't switch back yet because I wanted to keep a level of consistency through some of these tutorials. Um, but yeah, that's just something that I wanted to point out there. So one of the nicer features that comes into play with the Circle of the Moon Druid specialization is Primal Strike. When you are in beast form, so let's say you are a dire wolf and you're making either a bite attack or a swipe attack with your claws, prior to level 6, that attack would be considered piercing for the case of a bite and probably slashing for the case of your claws. That doesn't happen anymore. At level 6, both of those become magical attacks. So instead of you doing piercing or slashing damage, you are now doing magical damage. This means that if you're going up against a creature or something that has resistance against piercing and slashing, you now get to do the full amount of damage because your damage is now a magical type as opposed to a piercing or slashing damage type. That is one of the things that does change. Now, that's hard to do in relation to a particular beast of this type. So, essentially what you want to do is go through and drag this into your character sheet or your Actions tab and apply this to Circle of the Moon. And the reason why I've done that is because of this. By adding this to our Actions tab, we're going to save ourselves a little bit of a headache. Because of Primal Strike, as a direwolf, for example, we are now gaining the ability to change this particular piercing damage type to magical damage, simply because of the fact that we're now executing this with Primal Strike. So, to help us out, there's a couple of things that we can do. We can add a damage type. We can add a saving throw request, and we can add an effect. The damage type simply needs to be 2d6 plus 3, but instead of it being piercing damage, it needs to be magical damage. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this list, add a new item here, and just stop editing that. And what I can now do is drop dice into this particular field and make a modification here to the type of the damage. I can do that by left-clicking and holding down with the left mouse button on this d6 here. Right-click once in order to be able to add a second dice to it, and then drop that right into this field here. If you miss and it doesn't take, just do it again, but make sure you have your mouse cursor, the little hand part, so you'll see that there's a hand here in the middle. Just make sure it's over this particular part of the box. We're going to have an additional +3 to damage type, or bonus damage rather, and the damage type is magical. Now what this does is this gives us the ability to make a magical attack with the direwolf. But I still don't have the ability to do that, because if I attack and click on anything within this window, it's not going to actually hit because that direwolf isn't in our combat tracker, nor is it set up to target the particular creature that I want to hit. So what we want to do is open up the modifiers for this second option here. We do that. We can now set this up to be a melee attack, because that's what it is. It's a melee weapon attack. But we need to make sure that the bonus is a fixed bonus, because it's a +5 to hit. That gives us the ability to now make an attack roll as the direwolf. Okay. The next thing that we want to do is ensure that we set up the saving throw here, because the one thing that we can do is if we hit with that particular creature, and in this case this was a critical hit, that's nice. I'm going to now roll that damage. It should double it. Boom. That hurt. Anyway, back to the saving throw. The DC Strength 13 check can now be applied to that Wraith with one sort of bit of caution. So it's going to be a Strength check, but it's also going to be a fixed value. So 13? I think that's it. Is it going to add 13 to that? Let me just check this side. So no, we're good. That actually works perfectly, because if you look inside of our chat box, it's a versus a DC 13. So that gives us our ability to both attack as the direwolf and make the saving throw, but not the prone. So how do we add the prone? Well, that's what this third option is for. So what we need to do here is set it up so that it adds the prone condition, if you will. Now, generally, you can typically do something like this. Direwolf, semicolon, and then just go prone. But there's a problem. The Wraith is immune to the prone effect, so it doesn't apply. What does happen is that an effect is still thrown onto the Wraith, but it doesn't actually kick in. So in this particular case, I highly recommend simply doing this. Just simply make it as prone, and what you will actually get is a clearer message that the target is immune, so it didn't kick in, and it actually doesn't get stuck to the actual creature in question. Now, if I swap out the creature that I have targeted to, say, this succubus, so I'm going to untarget the Wraith, target the succubus, and all I'm doing is holding down the control key and right-click or left-clicking on these two icons. Now I've targeted the succubus, so let's make my attack roll against the succubus. Ooh, another critical hit. Okay, so now I'm doing my damage. Nice bit of damage there, and now I'm forcing them to make a saving throw. They failed. Now I can apply the prone effect, and they are now prone. In theory, what should happen is if I attack again, it should roll twice, which it does. Perfect. Because a creature that is prone suffers disadvantage when you attack them, meaning that you gain advantage to your attack, which we see here. And it's the coloration of the green die and the ADV indicator in our attack roll. That means I've hit them again. I'm doing more damage, but not critical damage this time. They now have to make another saving throw. They failed again. They are still prone. They ain't moving for a while. Now, theoretically, the first prone should have gone by once the end of the round came in. So we need to adjust that. Yeah, so it should be the next round. Actually, no. Now that I think about that, a creature is prone as long as they are prone. If they choose to stand up, that's when it goes away. So this is still valid. And that is how you can actually set things up for Primal Strike. Now, in brackets, I like to go Direwolf to indicate the creature that I'm using for that particular purpose. And you can set up all of the attacks, any saving throws, and update all of the damage types and any effects that are caused by any saving throws, all within this particular configuration here. And you can now make an attack as that Direwolf using Primal Strike. And that completes everything we have to do for level 6, so there's nothing else we need to set up there. So I've already dropped level 7 into place, mainly because of the fact all we have to worry about is the spell slot that we're going to be acquiring. So we're gaining a level 4 spell slot here. So what I'm going to do is choose a level 4 spell, simply drop it into place, and go with Grasping Vine. And that is everything we need to worry about. We do still need to prepare the spell, so just to make sure that it's accessible to you. And that is it. And that is level 7. At level 8, we are gaining a couple of additional adjustments to some existing things. So we're gaining an adjustment to our Wild Shape Improvement, which unfortunately doesn't really affect Circle of the Moon Druids. But we are going to gain an ability score improvement that will affect this particular character, in addition to our ability to prepare another spell. So I'm going to drop level 8 into place and explain why we're not gaining the Wild Shape Improvement. Like I explained at level 4, the Circle of the Moon Druid has already gained the ability to hit, or make use of rather, challenge rating 1 based beasts. And they got that at level 2. Whereas normal druids only had the ability to use challenge rating 1/4 related or rated beasts at level 2. So for our wild shape improvement, that doesn't really help us in this particular case. The ability score improvement, however, will. Because what we can do is, I'm going to show you 2 ability scores that I'm going to adjust by 1 point. And I'm going to adjust Constitution by 17. That's going to keep us at a +3 here. And I'm going to bring up Intelligence to a 17 as well. And next ability score improvement, we will gain an increase in our Constitution here, which will allow me to show another problem that people can run into and forget about. So the last thing I need to do is choose a spell. And I am going to take Wall of Fire for this one. And that's just simply because combat is primarily going to be this druid's forte, if you will. And anything that helps hold something in place and then blast it with fire is good in my books. And that's everything we need to do for level 8. At level 9, we're seeing an increase in a proficiency score bonus, but we are not seeing any increases in our cantrips. So the only thing we are going to be gaining here is access to 5th level spells. So let's drop this into place. Go back to our Actions tab, and I'm going to minimize level 4 spells here and choose a level 5th spell. I'm going to go with Greater Restoration. Now, I keep forgetting to do this, and it's an easy thing to forget to do, and that is to actually go through and prepare your spells. Otherwise, you won't be able to use them as a druid. So make sure you go ahead and do that. But that is everything we need to do for level 9. At level 10, we are gaining our next Druid feature from our Circle of the Moon class specialization here. We are also gaining another cantrip, and this is our last increase in our cantrip, so we're only going to gain 4. And that's on top of our ability to prepare another spell. So let me choose, or drop the level into place first. And I quickly choose Mass Cure Wounds. Prepare that. Okay. Now we're also gaining access to a cantrip here. So, because at level 10 we do gain that 4th cantrip. So I'm going to make sure that I drop this cantrip into place. I'm going to go with Resistance. A little bit different than what I usually do. This, other than Shillelagh and Poison Spray, there's really no continuous offensive capabilities that this particular druid has. They can guide a lot of people, and they can now gain a little bit of resistance to things. So, yeah, still useful. But that is our cantrip. The Elemental Wild Shape feature now gives you the ability to change into a Fire Elemental, an Air Elemental, Earth Elemental, or Water Elemental. In order to do so, you have to have both uses of your shape change ability available to you, meaning that you can't have used one earlier in the day and not have gone through a rest to regain that feature, or use, I should say. So that is the condition, and the only condition that it requires is that you have to have both of your wild shape options available to you in order to make use of the wild shape, because you're going to expend both of those to be able to swap into one of those elementals, or shape change into one of those elementals. Now, a Dungeon Master is going to be slightly confused if they're not familiar with the Druid capabilities, in that how the heck can a Druid, who's normally only able to shape change into beasts, be able to swap into an elemental creature? That's where linking this system into your Actions tab is going to come into play. So fairly simply, you just drop this into place, set it up as a Circle of the Moon feature, and it will show up in here. This way you can expend its use, and if you do get asked, wait, can you please explain that one to me? You can just link the thing to them. And that makes it a little easier for you as the player to keep the game flowing forward. You don't have to go searching for this feature by going to your abilities tab, clicking on the thing here, popping it open, dragging it over. You've already got that set up and ready to go here. So this chances are you're already on your abilities tab here. So you just drag it over and you're done. Now, I do believe I've already set up yep, I already did. So we're good with this particular level. That actually completes level 10. Level 11 is going to see our access to 6 level spells become available to us, and that will give us the ability to learn a 6 level spell. So I'm going to drop that into place, minimize level 5, select the Actions tab, and I'm going to take the heal capability here, and I'm going to make sure that I prepare that spell, unlike last time, and now it's ready for use. What's nice about the spell is it allows you to heal 70 hit points in one shot. I love that capability. No longer is it a die roll that I think it used to be 10d6 or something like that. Now it's simply 70 hit points flat out, plain and simple. But you only have one use of it because you only currently have one level 6 spell slot. And that is everything we need to do for level 11. At level 12, we are gaining another ability score improvement. So I'm going to go ahead and drop level 12 into place. And make sure that I go back and choose a spell. And move Earth. What's this? Interesting. Okay. Not quite ready to take that. I'm going to take Wall of Thorns. And set that up to prepare. So I've already got the level in place, correct? Yes. All right. So our ability score improvement. I will do a feat at a higher one of the other ability score improvements. In this particular case, I actually want to showcase what happens when you increase your Constitution to the point where your modifier is also increased as a result. So I'm going to drop 2 points onto the Constitution. And you'll see that we went from a +3 modifier bonus to a +4 modifier bonus. Well, what that now means is that this particular character, who shouldn't have any damage to hit points anymore, is missing 12 hit points. And the reason why I know he's missing, or she's missing 12 hit points, is because we had a +1 change to our modifier, and we are now level 12. Multiply 1 by 12, you get 12. So this becomes 111, I believe. And that is everything you need to do when you have a Constitution adjustment that increases, and it thereby increases your total hit points. And that also completes level 12. So at level 13, all we are really gaining is access to our first level 7 spell slots. And I want to point out a bit of a trend here. Once you hit level 11, your levels don't really gain any additional spell slots within that particular level for quite a while. So you may gain your first spell slot for level 6 at level 11, but you don't gain another one until you hit level 19. And for the level 7 one, you won't gain another slot until you hit level 20. When it comes to level 8 and level 9 spells, you only get one spell slot. So, with that in mind, I'm going to drop our level into place, minimize this, and select our ever-present Firestorm spell. I always love that one. And that is everything we need to do for level 13. At level 14, we will now gain our final Druid Circle feature, which in this case is going to be 1,000 forms. In addition to our ability to prepare, which I forgot to do at the previous level for Firestorm. And we are gaining our ability to actually prepare another spell. So in this case, I'm going to... Reverse Gravity could be interesting. I'm going to take that spell. And this time I'm going to prepare that spell. And then I'm going to go over 1,000 forms. So 1,000 forms is giving you the ability to cast a wizard spell called Alter Self at will, which means that you can do it at any point in time that you want to. Now, casting a spell still is classified as an action. So it doesn't mean that during combat you could cast Alter Self and make an attack at the same time. That just doesn't happen because casting a spell is a single action. You can't really do too much more in the way of spell casting or any form of combat-oriented action outside of a reaction as a spellcaster. You can, however, still make use of a bonus action to change into a beast form, but seeing as you just altered your physical form, why would you do that? But you can also still make a melee attack as a reaction through the attack of opportunity reaction. So you do still have that capability. You just physically can't take time to alter yourself and then make an attack with a melee weapon like you normally would if that was going to be your action. So there is that restriction. But at all points in time, you can literally be walking down the street and alter yourself a million times as you're walking down that particular street. Might be a little bit hilarious to people around you, but quite a distraction at the same time. But literally, you could literally do it. There's no limit to how often you can cast it throughout the course of a day. So let's set that up. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to drop this into our Circle of the Moon section here. Again, that is literally just simply to allow you quick access to drop this into place for the DM and to say I'm using this feature. Now for the spell, I'm going to temporarily hit back to Create PC, go to Spells, and look for Alter. And you'll see here that Alter Self becomes available, and it's a level 2 transmutation spell. Now this is normally restricted to knights, or Eldritch Knights rather, specific Eldritch invocations, sorcerers, wizards, and arcane tricksters. However, you also do gain this ability to cast it as this particular druid. So I'm going to drop this into place. Now, did that go into the elf section? Yes, it did. That's not where I wanted it to go. So let's drop it into the spells, and what should happen is it should drop into our spells category here, and it has. Why does that have bludgeoning damage? Ah, natural weapons. Okay, that makes sense. So yeah, you can literally change into whatever shape you can think of. I don't even think it has to be humanoid. It's whatever your imagination is willing to come up with. And that's literally it. So the effects are essentially Alter Self, and if you grow something that has bludgeoning or piercing or slashing or magic damage, you can just literally just click that for the damage that you're going to do. You don't gain as much damage as you would say as a direwolf, but if you're altering self, probably you're disguising yourself as something else anyway. So chances are you're not really going to be taking an attack, but it is at least there as a reactionary defense, if you will, for that particular capability. Now, I don't think I added... Now, that spell also does have to be prepared, but it doesn't count towards your prepared spells. You can simply use it. You don't even use a spellcasting level to actually execute it. You can count that 150 times throughout the course of a day if you want to. All right, now, oops, did I? Yes, I did. So, 1000 form, Circle of the Moon. There we go. So now that's in the right location. Now, we do also gain the ability to study another spell, which I think I might have already done. Just let me do a quick count. So yes, I've already gone through and linked in the ability, but I forgot to drag the level into place. So now that is done. And that completes everything that we need to do for level 14. At level 15, we are gaining access to our first 8th level spell. So let's drop that into place. Minimize all of these again and expand out the 8th levels. Go to the Actions tab. Give us something to look at. I'm going to go with Control Weather. Could always be useful. And then I'm going to make sure that that spell is prepared. And that is everything we need to do for level 15. At level 16, we are gaining our second to last ability score improvement in addition to our ability to prepare another spell. So in this case, I'm going to go with Sunburst. for the spell, even though I haven't dropped the level into place. I just happen to be on that page. There we go. And then I'm going to take a look at a feat. Oops, let's go to abilities and feats. In this particular case, I'm going to take Keen Mind, just simply because it gives me the ability to increase my intelligence score by an additional point, and allows me to become a little bit more knowledgeable about the terrain and area that I've been in, and the information that I've learned. So you always know which way is going to be north. You always know the number of hours left before the next sunrise or sunset, which is kind of useful for a druid. And you can accurately recall anything you have seen or heard within the past month. So that means you can essentially, if you've gone through and you happen to, in passing, read through a particular scroll that wasn't necessarily relevant to what you were doing at this particular point in time, as long as you come to a point where you realize, oh crap, that's now actually useful, you can recall the complete contents of that scroll up to 30 days past the point where you read it. Anything past that, you're going to have problems. You're going to have to go back to the scroll. But you will remember that you read that scroll. That is something that I, as a dungeon master, would give you the ability to more or less recall. So with Keen Mind, all you have to do is drop it onto your feats page or onto your abilities tab, and it goes into this particular slot here. You still have to increase your intelligence by 1 point. Actually, I think it did it. Yes, ability adjustment to 1 point. So it's already applied the ability of or the intelligence modifier for us. So we don't even have to worry about that. And we're done. That is everything we need to do for level 16. At level 17, we are gaining access to our 9th level spell. So I'm going to drop the level into place, expand out 9th level, select the Actions tab, minimize that. I'm going to go with True Resurrection. And make sure that that spell is prepared. And that's everything we have to do for level 17. Level 18, we are going to gain Timeless Body and Beast spells for features. In addition, we are gaining the ability to prepare another spell. So I'm going to drop this into place first. Select the Actions tab and drop the spell into place. Storm of Vengeance. Always a fun one. Lots of damage here, especially if you do lightning damage. Oh my, that one's an insane spell. And then I'm going to go over Timeless Body and Beast spells. So Timeless Body is here. And Beast spells. And we'll go over Beast spells first. So what Beast spells gives you is the ability to start casting spells regardless of whether you're in your normal form or in your beast form, so a wild-shaped form. It does not mean that you can cast a spell as an alter if you've altered yourself using the Alter Self spell, provided you switched into something that doesn't have the ability to cast spells. But there is a bit of a restriction. In this particular case, you are restricted to only semantic and verbal related components. If you have a material component and you are in your beast form, you will not be able to cast that spell. You won't be able to reach into your pouch to get the material component that you're getting or requiring, throw it on the ground and hold it and cast that spell in direwolf form, for example. Your belt pouch is most likely merged into your body, which means that you'd have to shape change back into normal form to get access to it. Or if you chose to leave your belt pouch exposed, it's probably dangling somewhere underneath your belly in wolf form, could have been cut off during a battle, may have been lost, those kinds of things. You're not going to be able to reach down and get at it and be able to pull things out very easily. So there is that little bit of a restriction. And that is literally everything you need to know for beast spells. In relation to Timeless Body, however, there's not really much you have to set up. In fact, there's nothing you have to set up. All it's giving you the ability to do is slow down your aging. So for every 10 years that pass, your body only ages 1 physical year. That kind of almost extends your life well past almost to the range of dwarves, possibly, if done right and done early. So if you reach level 18 at a very early age, you can seriously extend the duration of your life. So 99, you can essentially live 990 years if you make it to the age of 99. Sort of, plus or minus a few years. Because chances are you're not starting adventuring until at least the age of 18. So 99 minus 18 is 71, 72, 71. So 71 times 10 is 710 years. That's still a long life. That puts you into the range of an elvish lifespan. That's still pretty good. And that is everything we have to do for level 18. At level 19, we are gaining our last ability score improvement in addition to our second to last preparation spell, or spell preparation, depending on which way you want to word that sentence. I'm going to go with Foresight for this one and leave that there. And then I'm going to cover the ability score improvement here. So I'm actually going to modify my Constitution up to 20. And I'm going to bring my intelligence up to 19, because that's really the only thing that's going to not change there. Okay, so because I've made an additional point modifier here for my Constitution, I now need to add 18 additional hit points to my character. So that is 75, 83, if I'm not mistaken, 183. 182. No, 183. I was right. 183. All right. And that's everything we have to do for level 19, minus the fact that we have to drop it into place. Our last level is level 20. That gives us our Archdruid feature, and we don't need this anymore, our Archdruid feature, as well as our final spell preparation capability. Now, I'm going to drop back to level 6 because there was a spell here. But before I do that, I'm going to actually drop the level into place again. I was all over the place when dealing with leveling this time. I don't know why. You think after 20 plus videos in relation to character leveling that I would have at least remembered to do that by now. I'm going to give this creature, this druid, what did I give you for level 6? Heal a Mull of Thorns. So I'm going to give you Sunbeam. And that is all of our levels in preparation. So let's take a look at Archdruid. So Archdruid gives us the ability to make use of Wild Shape without having to worry about taking a short rest anymore. So it essentially removes the restriction of 2 uses per rest in the use of Wild Shape. Now, for Circle of the Moon Druid, that opens up a huge number of doors as to some of the other capabilities that you now have, specifically your Elemental Wild Shape capability. You can now essentially switch into an Elemental as often as you want and not burn through any of your uses of your Wild Shape capability. The other thing is that you can spend 10 hours as a creature at this point, regardless of whether it's an elemental or if it's a beast of any kind. And because you no longer have a limitation to how often you can actually switch shape, you could theoretically continue after that 10 hours into another 10-hour stretch. Now, granted, you will eventually become tired and you'll have to start making constitution saves to see if you remain awake. But as long as you remain awake, and as long as you're not flying anywhere and don't fall out of the sky, all you're going to do is pass out at some point throughout whatever trick or trek you're going through. But now at level 20, you are essentially boundless when it comes to the shapes that you can change into. Keep in mind, level 20 divided by 3 is still going to allow you to switch into a challenge rating of 6 character. That is absolutely insane. So any beast that is up to a challenge rating of 6, you now have the ability to switch into. Of course, you gained that at level 18, but now you can do it as frequently as you want. So level 20 becomes very nice when it comes to the Archdruid capability, specifically with the Circle of the Moon Druids. And that actually completes everything that we need to do for the setup and use of this particular character. Now, the last thing that I will do is I will link this into our Actions tab. And that is simply to allow the Archdruid feature to be linked to the Dungeon Master if they ask a question about it. There's no other reason for it. Finally, I will also get rid of our wild shape restriction by going to Preparation, zeroing that out, and changing this back to daily, because now it is simply there. You can make use of it as often as you want, and it doesn't go away. And with that, this particular character is now done. We don't have any additional levels that we can throw on it right now. We have no additional skills or features or spells to set up. And there really is nothing left to do for this particular character except to enjoy the character. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in another one. Thank you. I wish to thank you for taking the time to watch this particular video. I hope you found it informative and useful to familiarizing yourself with Fantasy Grounds in general, and that you had fun in the process. If you found the video useful and you liked the content of the particular video, go ahead and click that like button to let me know. And if you have any questions specific to the topic covered by this particular video, or just have some comments in general, please feel free to post something in the comment section, and I will do my best to respond to any questions that are asked. Additionally, I do release content quite regularly, and it's generally specific to Fantasy Grounds or 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons at this time. So if you'd like to be notified when new videos come out, go ahead and subscribe and click the notification bell to ensure that notification is sent to you when I release a new video.